Good afternoon, everyone. This is Mr. Pontus Mähler from Agora Gaming, and welcome to the talking panel for Bangkok Design Week at Game Dev Hub. The event runs from 6th of February to 8th of February. Yesterday we have already 2 panels. Today we have another 2, and tomorrow we have another 2. So the activities that we have is the panel and also the workshop out there. You can check them out. There's also around roughly almost 100 games made during game jams at Game Dev Hub last week, also showcased. So if you're interested and have some time spare afterwards, you guys please enjoy the hub and enjoy our game. So our main attraction here today, Mr. Pontus, I hope you have something very interesting for us. So please, thank you so much for becoming our guest today, and have a good talk.
Thank you. Good to see everyone. Are you all developers? Yes? Every single one of you? Okay, so that will allow me to be focus on the more important things. So, quick disclaimer, I have shaky hands, so if you're wondering why the microphone is shaky, it's not because I'm nervous, I just have shaky hands. Normally I have an ear mic. But no, I'm very excited to talk to you guys about closing deals. I love this talk because I think it's very important for developers from all around the world to understand where are we in games today, what kind of money exists, what are the chances of finding money, and how do you kind of figure out the landscape. Of course, the title is 2025, but technically speaking, I've already updated the deck, so you can count it as 2026. I try to do this talk twice a year, because the thing is, gaming moves very quickly, so it's very possible that what I say here and all the data I'm going to use 6 months from now will be different. So it's important to always stay up to date with the trends. You can go next. So very quickly about AGP, we're an investment bank. What that means is we do M&A transactions. If you're not familiar, are you familiar with M&A? Nope. So that's basically mergers and acquisitions. That means that we buy and sell companies, or IPs, or games. That's like our main business. Which means if one of you is successful enough 10 years from now, you want to sell your company and become a millionaire, you call me. That's our job, basically. We do transactions all over the world, but of course I am based here in Thailand. So we have a very strong network in Asia, particularly Korea and China is where we're very strong. We also work with every other country in Asia, of course, but Korea and China is where we are extra strong, I guess. So there are other investment banks in the industry. If you read gaming reports, there's a video investment bank called Areem. You might have heard of them. Areem is basically like the biggest investment bank in video games. And we're a very small boutique shop. Thanks. So these are the 5 partners. Actually, we have 2 more now. We're 7. But it's myself, my co-founder Jacques, Lily, who is our partner in China, Mateus, and Titus. If you've attended Gamescom Asia, you might have seen these 2. There are guys who run basically everything AGP, social medias, events. The pitch competition at Gamescom Asia is these 2 guys. And they'll be here for this year's Gamescom Asia as well. So you might see them around. We're a very small boutique shop. In total, we are 7 people on the banking side, and then we have 9 people in China. So currently we have 2 offices basically. A global remote office and a Chinese office. So we're going to quickly walk through the state of the market. Then we're going to talk about the publisher markets, help you guys understand the stakeholders. What is a publisher? What is an investor? And what are they looking for? A lot of developers always like, oh, publishers, it's so hard. I'm pitching them. My game is going to recoup, blah, blah, blah. But you don't really understand the math. So what we're going to go through here is the real math on how to find a deal and how you can try to qualify for one. And then a little bit on your data room, where to pitch, and also your expectations, because the deal terms have changed for the worse, which is, of course, not a good thing, but for the future, it will be a good thing. And then the timeline. So when I say timeline, I mean, when do you start pitching? Which is one of the hardest things to decide, because if you pitch too early, you might not get another chance, but if you pitch too late, you might be out of money. So first, let's very quickly go over some of the data. Now, I highly recommend everybody to subscribe to this newsletter. It's called convoy.vc. so konvoy.vc. They provide a very strong report on a quarterly basis on what's happening globally in the world. So exactly how much money is being deployed, early stage, mid stage, late stage, etc. So it gives you a really good overview of the market. So if we take a look at this is of course 2024, but I wanted to show you guys the history. You can see back there in 2024 we had $2 billion being invested, the year before 2.3, and the year before that 7, and the year before that 10. So what we can see here is sadly, a very big downwards trend. And this is still continuing today. So the 2025 report is already available online, and you can see it also continuing down. And I'm going to explain why in a second. Now, the amount of deals are also going down. Of course, there's less money, which means that there is less investments to make, but also VCs are becoming much more, careful in their investments, I guess you could say, than before. Back there in 2022, 2021, the COVID era, you could show up with a pitch deck and get money. You could have a paper, no build, no nothing, and you got funded. And that's part of why we are in the cycle we are today. Now, this one is very exciting to me, because if you guys had seen this report a couple of years ago, there were almost no deals in Asia. And as you can see, there are now more deals in Asia than in NA and Europe. Again, this is 2024, but 2025 looks similar. So I'm very excited to see that there's a lot more money being invested over here. I think there are so many opportunities, both in Southeast Asia, but also in Korea and Japan. And I think we're going to continue to see large amounts of investments in these regions. M&A, that's of course, again, our bread and butter. So in 2024, there were about 130 deals, the year before that 140. But the M&A industry is actually equally as active as it used to be. So this hasn't actually changed much. It's still, the reason why there are less deals is simply because there are less companies to buy, and because there is less money. So this is still continuing very strongly. In 2025, the numbers look very similar to 2024, and we're going to continue to see large, medium, and small M&A transactions. And since we work on this side of the industry, we ourselves are expecting to do between 5 and 10 deals this year, just ourselves. So now I'm going to tell you guys what the math is behind everything and why we're seeing the money come down. Let's start with publishers. This is the most common misconception. When people come to a publisher to pitch, you guys go there and you're like, hey, I need $300,000, or, and let's use my example here actually, I need 1 million, right? So I need $1 million to complete my game. Sounds simple, right? You go and ask for 1 million, that means that you break even at 1 million. That's usually what developers think. That is not the reality. This here is a real math from a deal that I closed last year. So on a $1 million budget, on average, a publisher will put in between 25 to 50% additional in marketing. So if they spend $1 million in development, they're going to spend $250,000 on marketing. For the deal I closed, it's 500. Now you have to remember that all of the spend that goes into the game has to be recouped for the publisher to be profitable. And now you have to add in their internal cost. They also have employees, right? They got to pay their employees, their marketing team, QA, etc. They might have additional spend, localization, porting, and so forth. So for this particular deal, you're looking at $1.8 million, even though you only asked for 1. That is almost double the amount of cash that you came to ask for, which means that takes double the time to break even, right? Now, the SRP, are you guys familiar with SRP? No? It's really just means simple retail price. And that is the price on Steam, basically. Now, here's another mistake that developers make. They're like, okay, so my game costs $19.99, let's do 20. My game costs $20, Steam takes 30, and that's it, right? That's the base price. No, that is not the base price. If you sell your game for $20, on average, throughout a lifetime of the game, it's $10, half. So when you go to a publisher and you request $1 million, with this kind of math, this marketing investment, and this internal cost, it means you need 180,000 copies to break even. Not 100,000, not 80,000, 180,000. A lot more than what you think you put in your pitch deck. So a lot of developers come to us, both investors and publishers, and they're like, oh yeah, but I'm looking for $1 million. That's not that much. And they fail to remember all the additional cost plus Steam cuts, currency exchange rates, refunds, etc. So to explain to you why usually on average it's 50% is because currency exchange, number one, right? If you sell a game for $20 in America, it's not going to cost $20 in Thailand. Usually we pay between 60 to 80% of the total price over here, right? China, same thing. Korea pays 10% less, Japan pays 10% less, so forth, so forth. So again, on average, you're looking at half. Refunds is usually between 5 and 20% of an entire game. Even the popular ones have like 5 to 8, even 10, 11% sometimes. So all in all, $10 on a $20 game, which means if you're pitching me a $10 game, that's $5 per copy. That's a lot of units to recoup that investment you're asking from me. So this is the first thing you need to get into your head when you go out and pitch. You need to take into account all this extra information when you put your break-even units in your pitch deck. And then you have to ask yourself, does this deal make sense? So how does a publisher decide whether or not a deal makes sense? 3 to 4x is what they're looking for. So in every single game that they're looking to invest in, they need to make a 3 to 4x. So if, once again, we take my example, that game needs to sell 600 to 700,000 units for this publisher to say yes to the game. Why? Because not every game a publisher launches will succeed. And if they were looking for a 2x in every game, and half of them failed, they'll be break even, right? So they need to target a 3 to 4x on the whole portfolio because a lot of games will fail. And the ones who do succeed need to return a positive, need to return profits across the whole portfolio. So if you, for example, put in a pitch deck, okay, 100,000 units is break even, and you expect it to sell 150, which happens a lot. A lot of pitch decks that come to me are like, oh, my base forecast is 150,000 units, and the break even is 100K. That's good, right? No, it's not. I will not touch that game because a 50,000 unit profit margin is not enough for all of this that you can see in the example and to get me that 3 to 4x on average on a portfolio. So developers really need to reconsider their math when they go and pitch. And you need to look at your SRP, you need to look at your whole case and think, does it make sense? So you don't waste a lot of time pitching. On average, I mean, less than 5% of games sell over 100,000 units as well. It's even lower than that now. I think it's down to 2 or 3%. So really, this particular example I have right there has a very low chance of succeeding. So that's the publisher math. And usually, nowadays, which we'll get to at the end of the presentation, the publisher recoups everything before you get paid, which is the second problem. Now let's talk about VCs. So I think 99% of all developers misunderstand what a VC is. You guys think that, oh, I'm asking for a little bit of money and then, I'm going to make my game and 5, 7, 8 years from now, we'll see what happens. That's the problem. A fund needs to sell and exit their companies when they invest into equity, right? You need to sell their shares for them, or you need to hire me to sell your company, for example. But in order for them to be profitable in the whole portfolio, same thing as with the publishers, they can't look for a 3x, they have to look for a 10x or a 100x. That's why you always hear these stories on VCs about unicorns, right? Have you guys ever heard the unicorn term? It's the exact same thing in games, because 9 out of 10 of you will fail. Look at all the VC-funded companies in the last 4 years and look at how many of them are still here. Almost none of the AAA studios you saw getting announced are alive today. So they need to have that unicorn. So on the publisher side, they're looking for a 3 to 4x. On the VC side, they have to look for a 10x plus. And the reality is, indie games aren't a 10x plus. Most of you, even if you're good at your job, even if you make great games, your first one usually doesn't sell too well, regardless. Like your first ever game, unless you're lucky and you hit Stardew Valley, you're just going to make a little bit of money. And that's okay, by the way. That's great. If you launch a game, positive reviews, you sell 100,000 units, you should be very proud. They're not going to be proud because it simply doesn't work in their math. They need you to sell 1 million units, and then they need you to make another game to sell another 1 million units, and then they can exit you. So on average, an indie cycle is your first game does okay, your second game hopefully does better, and your third game takes off. If you look at most indie studios, that's the case. If you guys have played Angry Birds, can you guys guess how many games before? 55 games before they hit Angry Birds. That was their 55th game. Every game before that failed. So that's, it doesn't take, it doesn't work in one day. And it's the same kind of thesis here. So another example down here, 15 investments, 7 fail. 8 of them return a 2x. That means that they've only done a 1.0x fund return. Not enough, right? Throughout the lifetime of a fund, they're aiming for a 3x on the whole thing, but that is in 8 years, and with all the companies failing, and some of them reaching some sort of unicorn status or a very high valuation. And that's why you see all of these VCs invest in AAA, AA resumes, or free-to-play. Because if a free-to-play game takes off and they exit, that's a $100, $200, $500 million exit. An indie game is not going to hit that, ever. So do I agree with the fact that all the VCs invested in these AAA resumes? No, I think it was frankly fucking stupid. Apologies for my language. It was really stupid. And now you can see that because all of them are failing. However, could they have done it differently? Probably not. If they had put all of that money into indies, I don't know if they would have done any exits. The companies would have still been alive. I think most indies, you guys continue to power through no matter what happens. And the AAA guys are like, oh shit, I lost my $200,000 salary. I need to go to the next company. But it wouldn't have given them these returns. So as you can see, developers, generally speaking, doesn't understand what these stakeholders want and the math behind it. So to 9 out of 10 of you, I say, don't talk to VCs. It's a waste of your time. It really is. They're not going to give you money because you don't fit their catalog. You could be spending your time pitching publishers or other people. Angel investors can invest, for example. And actually, let's use myself as an example. I've done 9 angel investments in gaming companies. This is how many exits I have. 0. My first investment was 8 years ago. And technically, that company now went from 4 people when I invested to 78. So by all accounts, I did a great investment. And if the company exits, I'm going to make probably 20, 30 times my money. And, champagne on me next time, if I exit. We don't know if their next game is going to succeed. And even if it does, will they be at a high enough multiple to exit and pay me back and everybody else? We don't know. So I've been there. I've done it. I've done 9 of them. 4 are dead now. 5 are still alive. 2 are doing incredible. There's one company at 180 now. And then there's a Malaysian one at 76. And the other 3 are okay, off, basically. So yeah, it's tough out there for equity investors. It really, really is. Hopefully this sheds a little bit more light. So market research, I just told you about, well, don't talk to VCs, really. That's what I said, right? So if you're going to talk to publishers, where are they today? What has changed in the market? So this is the slide that I think is the most important, and this one I update every 6 months because this changes all the time. So I told you that back in COVID, you could get money for anything, right? And not just that, publishers had so much money. They could, I think we would have 20 people over here at the 5 million plus that could fund these types of games. Nowadays, less than 5. In the 1 million to 3 million, I think that was kind of the sweet spot back in COVID. And honestly, maybe 80 to 100 publishers could fund between the 1 million to 3 million stage. Today, less than 20. And then you have the sub 1 million category. That's 80% of the entire publisher market, and I would even argue 90% since I updated this slide. So if you have a budget over 1 million, there's less than 25 people you can call in the whole industry. That's the reality. All of these are conducted from interviews with our partners, by the way, so it's not me guessing. This is real data that I walked through with all of these investors and publishers. So let's start with we can start at the top. So on the 5 million stage, there really is only Asians left that can fund this kind of budgets. Like Amazon shut down their publishing department and a couple of other Western publishers have shut down. Okay, there's maybe 3 or 4 in the West that can be here, but generally speaking, those 3 to 4 will fund games on the left side. On the 5 million plus, you have large Asian companies like Krafton, like Nexon, NCSoft, etc., all this kind of stuff that technically has the money to do it, but Very, very, very unlikely. What you require to pitch these kind of budgets is a full-blown vertical slice. If you do not have a vertical slice, they will not talk to you, and you can never get more than 5 million. 4 years ago, you could have done it on a prototype, not anymore. They also expect you to have playtesting data, mock reviews, focus groups, anything that can basically verify the fact that it's a good game. And most of the time, it has to be a co-op or a free-to-play game. Something that warrants coming back over and over, like Helldivers, where you have these battle passes, Arc Raiders, battle passes, etc. It has to be something you can continue to monetize. Otherwise, if it's single player, maybe 10 games per year gets funded in this kind of category that are new. Very, very low. In the 1 to 3 million, this is where, honestly, in my personal opinion, the best games on the market right now are made in that 1 to 3 million range. I think it's speaking of Western salaries, so I think it's a perfect place to be in, but it's really tough nowadays. I'm currently working on 2 games in this category, and actually yesterday I had a meeting with one of them, and when we went through the list, there were only 8 companies that fit that game. Based on this slide and the genre the game is in. Only 8. So after we've pitched those 8 publishers, if I fail, that game's dead. That's the sad reality. Generally speaking, they like wish lists at this stage. They like to see that something's going on. Maybe you've launched a trailer, maybe you've had a viral TikTok, whatever. They just like to see something. It's not required, but generally speaking, they like it. And they want to see something fresh, something unique in this range. Now, sub 1 million, honestly, all over the place. You can get signed with any type of genre, single player, co-op, multiplayer, doesn't really matter. Publishers here are open for everything, but they want de-risked. So something that has changed, which I believe is my next slide, I think it's my next slide, is that they want to see the games at a later stage. Ideally, 18 months or less to launch. 12 ideal, but 18 in kind of the top end. But one of the words that every publisher I asked told me was replayability and systemic, meaning games that, maybe they are simple and cheap and pixel arted or whatever, but you can play them for 40 hours. Something you can come back to. Manor Lords was originally a one-man developer, right? Eventually, there was a co-dev team, so you don't believe everything you read. There are a lot more than one. But they started as one. And that game is a great example, right? You do one campaign, so to speak, or one map, and you do another one, and another one, and another one. That's the key word. They like games that it doesn't matter how simple it is. You just want to come back, create a community and have a good time. So it doesn't have to be a live ops game, just something you can replay. So that's the publisher market today. Doesn't look great, does it? So, summary, publishers want to de-risk. They're looking for a steady 2 to 3x. Timeline of investments have moved, and we're going to show you the timeline in a second. And VCs need to hit big. So when I read developers complaining on Reddit, oh, the VCs are so bad, they're not funding any indie games, they're not doing this, they're not doing that, this is why. You have to remember, even though you could be a good company at a 2 to 3x, it is a bad VC investment, right? That's the differentiator you have to remember. You are not a good enough company if you make me 3 times the money as a VC, because I will lose the investors' money throughout the whole fund. Next. Okay, so I changed the timeline slide, did I? Let's fast forward to the timeline slide. I don't know why it's at the end. Yeah, keep going. We'll come back. I think I put it in the wrong order. Next. More. No, the other way. Sorry. Did I remove the timeline slide? Keep going. Whoops. There we go. I don't know why I put it in the back. So this is supposed to be earlier because it's relevant to what we just talked about. So I don't have a laser, so I'm just going to talk and you guys can look at it, right? So as you can see here, I've added some boxes called low, medium, and high. And this is basically explaining when you can pitch in today's market. To be very clear, there are outliers. You could get signed at any one of these places, right? But my job is closing deals, and I can tell you from experience that this is, generally speaking, the market. So back in 2020 to 2022, you could get signed on a prototype. You could get signed on a paper pitch, didn't really matter. 2020 to 2022 was like the golden age of getting money. It was a really good time. Since then, things have drastically changed. Now people are expecting, a pre-production MVP in social media, something community, a little bit of wish lists, and that is still only a low to low medium chance of getting signed. If you have over 100K wish lists, different story, right? Then of course you're going to be able to get signed very easily. But if you are in that sub 10,000, little bit of community, that's still not enough. You're in the low to medium chance tier. If you have a vertical slice, then you're good. Medium chance for me is a good chance. You should be pitching here. So I told you earlier, when should you be pitching? I don't have an answer for you. It really comes down to your own company. If you're running out of money, ignore this whole slide. Just pitch. What do you have to lose? You're going to die anyway, right? If you do have money, I recommend you wait until vertical slice. Otherwise, you're going to travel to Gamescom, you're going to spend 5,000 USD, you're going to come home because you were in the pre-production phase, and you're going to have wasted money and time. It's okay to fly over to build a network, to start pitching, etc. But when you really want to pitch, when you're there to ask for money, the later stage you can do it nowadays, the better. It is going to save you time, and it's going to be your highest chance. Now, if you're lucky enough to make it all the way to beta without any funding, then this is the best chance. Now, tied to all of these words as well, it doesn't just have to do with chance, also your terms. The later you pitch, the better your terms. If you pitch over here, you can negotiate a large amount of revenue share even on day one, even if they put money into your game. You brought it to alpha on your own. To beta on your own, right? You paid for that. So of course the publisher has to take that account into the negotiation. But if you start all the way back in pre-production MVP, I guarantee you they'll ask for 100% of your revenue until they recoup. So try to make it as far as you can before you pitch. Now you can go all the way back. This is why you should read your pitch before you talk. Double check. Okay, next. And next. All right, so what can you do to prepare? There are many things you can do to prepare, of course. I actually say this, that before even making your game, you should be doing your market research. Before even making it. You need to understand who your target customer is before you make a game. You can't just sit down and start developing a game and be like, 2 years later, oh shit, who's my customer? You need to think about that very early. I'm a huge fan of Game Discovery Co. I think that's one of the best websites you can find. You can look at games, you can look at what players wishlisted similar games. So if you go to a page and you can see, let's take Hades for example, because I use that later in the presentation. You can actually see what the average Hades player is wishlisting. So you can see what other types of games a Hades player is like. That's really valuable feedback, right? Because if you're building a Hades type of game, you can now compare it to what all of those wishlisters are looking for. So when you're starting to market research your game, you can be like, okay, so if I have this mechanic and this mechanic, that matches with the Hades audience. So that's really going to help me to sell the title. But yeah, target audience, who are they? Age, location, income. We fast-tracked to one slide, which we'll show later. Basically, my point with that slide is you don't need to be successful globally. If you just hit Sweden, for example, my home country, Sweden has a lot of money. If you just sell to 100,000 people in Sweden, that's enough units to make money for your company, right? You do not have to be successful globally. So if you do your market research and you're like, my customer is in Sweden, Denmark, and Norway, that's enough. You don't need to be globally successful or famous. You just need to find your target audience regardless of the country and double down on that group. What other genres do they like? That's why I love Game Discover Co. Great way to find out what genres they like. The rest of them are good too, but shout out to those guys. It's a really good website. I'm not paid, by the way. Monetization mindset, of course. If you're, for example, coming to Southeast Asia, we all know we don't like to pay for games here. We like free-to-play games. Most of us. There's not a lot of indie games that are successful in Southeast Asia because we like, PUBGs and Fortnites, etc., where we can choose to pay. So if you're going for certain markets and platforms, you need to understand the spending habits of that country. Competitive landscape, so are there similar games in terms of genre? I hate the word USP. I think it doesn't really work anymore. I think you should be looking at mechanics. That's what you should be looking at. So what similar mechanics do you have and how are you doing them better? I always like to use, have you guys played Curse of the Dead Gods? Yeah? You? One person? Okay. So Curse of the Dead Gods is just another Hades with a small twist. And they do it really well, right? They have this curse system, and every time when you walk through a door, you can get a curse that will give you a buff and a debuff. And if you get too many curses, you go down to 1 HP and you die. Well, you don't die, you have to get hit to die, but still. It's such a small, simple mechanic that completely innovated the whole thing, because once you get enough curses, you're like, oh crap, my HP is going down, I gotta finish, go, 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 go. And it creates that level of adrenaline that made me love the game. But really, it's just another Hades, right? They didn't really innovate that much, but they improved the mechanic and they made it perfect. So that's what I like to say nowadays. If you're looking to be unique, don't be. Just do something better. You don't have to be an entirely new genre, an entirely new game. You just have to have a small little twist, and that's enough to be successful. And I think Curse of the Dead Gods sold like 2 million units or 3 million units. So very successful game. But if you can, if there's a market gap, go for it. I mean, if you had asked me 2 years ago that Peak was going to drop and sell 7 million units, I would have called you crazy. But Peak dropped and they sold 7 million units. And it's just a climbing game with friends, right? They figured out that people love to mess around with each other and just have fun, and they did a great job on it. So if there is a gap, go for it. Yeah, and the last one is just trends. Stay up to date, but don't follow trends. A great example is, what games are still alive in Battle Royale? PUBG and Fortnite. What games were there 10 years ago? PUBG and Fortnite. What happened to all the other extraction games? Poof, dead. You don't have to follow what everybody else does. The amount of Battle Royales that was pitched to me like 6 years ago, you guys wouldn't understand. It's like half my inbox was Battle Royale. And I'm like, guys, this is, no. No. Nobody's gonna stop playing PUBG and Fortnite because they're great games. I mean, you gotta bring me something fresh if I'm gonna play your game, right? And actually, another good example is all the hero shooters have died, right? It's just Overwatch until Marvel Rivals. And what does Marvel Rivals do? They use characters we all love. If it wasn't Marvel, would people play it as much as they do? I highly doubt it. So they took characters that everyone loves, everybody had in their childhoods, and they made a great game with it. That's really the only USP Marvel Rivals has. Otherwise, to me, it's just Overwatch. They're kind of the same game. So yeah, you can be smart about it. Next. Do we have a hard cutoff in 15, by the way? Or
Sorry?
is it a hard cutoff in 15?
No.
I talk too much, sorry.
You can talk until like 6. No.
That's a bit too long. So this is a good example. This is a very old slide. But I used to work a little bit with Garena and Tencent here in Southeast Asia when Arena of Valor first launched. So this is a very, very outdated slide. But back then, they had 55 million daily active users in China, making about 145 million a month or something like that. By the way, I think the game today still makes like 2 billion a year. It's an incredibly successful game. But what they did was, when I made this slide 8 to 10 years ago, I think it's a 10-year-old slide, honestly, the game just launched in Europe and only had 100,000 CCU. And after 3 months, they deemed it a failure and they shut it down. That's interesting, right? Because a game that is that incredibly successful, I'm sure everybody here has played it, right? I've played it. I think it's a great game. Would I play it if I lived in Sweden? Not really. Not because I don't have a phone in Sweden. It's because we don't really play these types of games over there. So this goes back to my comment earlier about just targeting your audience regardless of where they are. Tencent and Garena thought that this game could be successful in Europe, and of course you have to try. It's printing money, it's doing great, but it's not. It's just not a fit for the European audience. So even a giant that big can't succeed in Europe, and you as an indie game think you're going to succeed globally. This is one of my bigger issues with some pitches from indies. I'm like, if Tencent can't do it, how the hell are you going to do it? You know? So try to focus on your smaller group of your audience. So here's just an example. I just wanted to give you guys, I don't know why the formatting is off, but let's pretend that was intentional. So this is an example of market research. I like to tell all developers that you should do this with your own game. Now Hades is a good and a bad example. It's good because everybody knows it. It's a bad example because they're one of the few games that literally succeeded globally. The opposite of what I just said. But I think they did that because it was so relatable. But regardless, your own game, I suggest you sit down and you make this slide yourself with your own game and you figure out, okay, what age group am I targeting, right? Is it 16 plus, is it 24 plus, whatever? What genders am I targeting, you know? Is it for both genders? Is it primarily for male, female, others? What do you actually want to target? And for example, with Hades, I feel like it leans slightly towards the male audience, and it did. It sold more to men than to women. But they have a lot of story, character development, etc. So because of that, it also appealed to practically everybody. And the fact that it was Greek mythology, something I loved as a kid as well, is why I bought it, right? I didn't care much for roguelites and those kind of games before, but I'm a huge sucker for Greek mythology. I played every, ancient mythology, I played all the campaigns 10 times over. I love this stuff. So for me, technically, if it used me as a target, this here alone was enough for me to buy the game, the interest, right? So when you go through and you write this down for your own game, what age, what genders, what locations, and what income level, what are you going to target the pricing, right? And remember what I said, that if you are charging $20 or $50, doesn't matter, half that in Southeast Asia and China in general as a base price when you're looking at the income level. So if you have a lot of players in, let's say, Southeast Asia, you have to remember that if you're pricing your game at 20, it's actually going to be 10 over here, right? So that means, again, what's your net? 5. Remember that. Your gross cut by half enters your bank account. So if you're selling the game at 20 and your biggest audience is in Southeast Asia, the chances are you're going to get between $5 and $7 net per copy. So you have to remember that when you're looking at your case. Again, interest. What interest would your potential player have? For Hades, like I said, I think it's Greek mythology, action RPGs, fast-paced combat, character-driven narratives. For me, these are like some of the core interests, so that means they should like similar game. And what values? Challenges, obstacles, and replayability, where I continuously, every time I replay, I get something new, right? When you play Hades, every replay, you get a new little snippet of the story. Personality. What kind of personality would your audience have? Persistent, strategic thinkers, dark humor mixed with mythology, and of course, gaming habits. How much do they play? Because you have to also remember that depending on the audience that you have, they might be people that have jobs and play 2 hours a day, or it might be people who play 10, 15 hours a day. And that will adapt your ultimate pitch. So again, I recommend that you use Game Discover Co. And if you haven't already done this for your game, do this. Try to figure out who your target audience is. Nice. Okay, that's broken. I don't know why that's broken, but I remember the slide, so it's okay. My point here is the same thing, that you don't have to be successful globally. And 40% of all copies that were sold were in non-English speaking countries. That's massive. Usually, for your reference, it's 10 to 20%. Hades managed double or even triple, depending on the title. And these were supposed to say what languages, but I don't remember. My brain's not that good. But yeah, so when you're targeting your audience, remember, there's so much more money you could make, even if it's not English speakers as well. It doesn't have to be. Next. So this one works. Weird. So I've talked a lot about, okay, you need to research this, you need to do this, you need to consider what the publisher wants, what the investor wants, blah, 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 blah. So now what are you going to do? It's not a one-way conversation, right? You also need to decide who you're going to work with. If you're pitching a publisher, you have to remember that they should be pitching you too. This is a partnership. If they're not good enough for you, they're not good enough for you. You cannot treat it as they're the almighty, they have all the money. No, screw that. This is a partnership, we're going to negotiate, we're going to talk about what's best. So how do you start doing that? Researching the publisher you want to work with. So if I just told you that you were going to make Hades, let's continue to use Hades because it's easy. And this is Raw Fury, by the way, this publisher right here. And this is from Game Discover Co. So you have a Hades game. You love Raw Fury. You played so many of the games, you think they're a great publisher. So the first thing you should do is you should go to Raw Fury's titles and you should see what kind of games have they had that were successful. And now that you look at all of those games, you're like, well, wait a second. There is no Hades type of game here. Not a single one. So if they sign my Hades game, they don't have a pre-existing audience. They don't have a guaranteed audience that you can just borrow and they will buy your game as well because they've never sold a Hades game. And you see, this can take you 3 minutes. So in 3 minutes, you could have figured out, oh shit, Raw Fury is a bad publisher for me. They're a great publisher for these kind of genres, but for me, so now you don't email them, you don't book a meeting with them, and you save both of you some time. Now you can spend your time on a publisher who has a catalog that actually fits you. This is a great time saver. You can also see the CCU, etc., which is not too irrelevant, and of course, the gross revenue per title. What I recommend you do is that if you have a list of your dream partners, whether it's a publisher or a VC, this is the first thing you should be doing. Research them, see what games they have, and then in your pitch deck, you can literally be, hey, Raw Fury, I saw you had Dome Keeper, Townscaper, and Kingdom Classic. They're a great game for me because I have a game that's similar to those three. So you and I are going to make a great game, and we're going to be able to sell to your previous audience. So please do this when you're researching publishers. Next. So now you're going to prepare your data room. Here are some of the things that we look at as publishers and investors. The first thing is skill set diversity. What does that mean? It means that I'm not going to do an investment in a team with 4 programmers, right? It doesn't matter if you're going to hire your artists and whatever later. I'm not going to invest in you when you have 4 programmers for one simple reason. When we look at pitches and pitch decks, and let's just make it simple. Let's say you have 4 mechanics, and one of them requires programmers. If you have a demo for me, then the only good thing you're going to be able to show me is what the programmers are doing. The other 3 right now are non-existent. So you're basically expecting me to gamble on the other 3 mechanics with people you've not yet hired. That makes it a really hard investment case. And by the way, I did invest in a game with 4 programmers. It did not go well. So been there, done that. The point is that when we look at a pitch deck early, we would ideally like to see maybe 2 or even 3 of those 4 mechanics already being covered by the core team. So we want to see that, okay, I've seen what the 3 of you guys can do. This is great. You've covered those 3 points already. You only need to hire for the last mechanic. Great. We can do it. So the less you have in your core team of the skill sets you need, the harder it is to find one. Proven track record, honestly, I don't care. I've never cared about your resume or your track record, but the slide is what video game investors and publishers look for. I'm also an investor, but I don't give a shit, to be honest. I care about the demo you put in front of me. If the demo is amazing, your resume doesn't matter at all. And by the way, I'm a college dropout. I don't have a resume either. So proven track record to me doesn't matter. It's good. If you're from Ubisoft, maybe I'll look at your pitch deck anyway, blah, blah, blah. But in the end, all that's going to matter is that demo. That's all that matters. Financial responsibility. This is tough. Almost every developer I speak to mismanage their budgets, meaning they over budget, under budget, not really sure what they're looking for. This one is more of a yellow line. If you don't know 100% what to do, it's okay. But I do expect you to have some level of control. And the USP, like I said, I hate the word USP, but every investor and publisher uses the word, so I kept it here. Like I said earlier, I care about the twist on the mechanic personally. And then scalability and market potential. That one I do care about. Going back to my math example, right? Remember, I mentioned 180,000 units break even means I need to sell 600 or 800,000 to be happy with my investment. Now, if you have a very niche game, maybe 800,000 units simply isn't possible. There isn't a big enough audience for the game that you're making. Then I'm also not going to invest. So this is very important of what is the maximum audience if we nail it out of the park. Next. This is very simple. It's just a quick photo. What do you need? Of course, you need to have a pitch. In that pitch deck, your company, your roadmap, your investment, and why should I work with you? Data, if you have any, that's great. Play tests, how are you going to target the genre? All of that market research I showed you in the previous slides. If you have that, amazing, absolutely amazing. And put in as much as you can. If you're working towards a VC or an investor, the more important thing is, of course, the future of the company. Are you going to be an IP company? Are you going to be multiple titles? Very different, right? Are you just going to build the same IP for the next 5 years? Or are you going to be a shooter, and then 2 years from now, you decide to make a city builder? As an investor, that's not good, right? I'm going to expect you to double down. You don't have to do shooters for the rest of your life, but if you've built your entire core of your company on shooters and those systems, you can't just swap to an entirely different genre. A publisher doesn't necessarily care. They only care about the game because they're investing directly into the game. Of course, it's important to them if you're like, hey, if this relationship does well, let's make the sequels together. That's a bonus point, but it doesn't matter until you launch the first game. Next. So you should have all of this. Again, quick picture. I don't need to go through all of them, I think. And I love when I get a data room like this. This is my favorite thing. So I get the pitch deck. I get some trailers and videos. So if I'm not convinced by your pitch deck, if you have a video for me to look at, I can change my mind. You know, because it's hard to make a good pitch deck, you know. And I get 2,000 a year. So it's hard for you to stand out. And trust me, you don't have to have AAA graphics just for me to look at it. So actually, latest yesterday, an investor buddy of mine sent me a game, which is frankly one of the ugliest games I've ever seen, with like a match 3 mechanic with a bunch of spiders and blah, 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 blah. And the only thing he wrote was, I like this, play this. And I was like, okay. Saw the pitch deck, horrible. Played it, 3 hours later, it was pretty good. That's a pretty good demo. It's possible we might actually invest in this game now. But it's a good example. I looked at the trailer and I liked what I saw, which is why I played it. So if you have trailer and video, great. Sales data and performance, this is basically just you doing your background research on the genre, like the max capacity. I don't care much about that, to be honest, because I'm gonna have to do my own anyway. If you have it, great, bonus points, but not that important. Budget and production schedule, the most important part, right? How long is your timeline? Where are you gonna spend the money? How much have you spent already? And remember, sweat equity counts. So if you haven't paid yourself cash, you should still assume that you've been paying yourself cash the whole time when you negotiate. So let's say your salary is $24,000 a year, then that should be there from day one when you started on the game. If you've been working full time, even if you're not paying yourself, put it into the pitch deck. I have invested $48,000, 2 years of my life into this game. It counts when you negotiate. Market research report, what I just explained to you guys in very big detail. Yes, please. Most people don't have it, but yes, please. And the game forecast as well, but again, whatever. It's okay if you have it. Next. Yeah, next. And next week, jump thing. So, what have we learned, or the so-called, I like to call this the book of understanding. It says 2025, but this is 2026. It's the same thing. I updated the slides. I forgot to change the number to 2026. VC money practically doesn't exist for you guys. For indie developers, it's a waste of your time. It's also drying up for the larger teams. And to go back to the reasoning why, there hasn't been any exits, right? You saw all those money being deployed the last 4 years. You saw all these announcements about big executives starting their own studio, raising 30 million, raising 60 million. Where are the games? They're not out, and nobody's bought them. Ergo, there is no new funds, right? Until we see exits and all of that cash that was spent in the last 5 years, we're not going to come back to a world where we have that kind of money anymore. On the positive side, there is a new thing, which is not in my deck. Project financing funds are showing up everywhere. We have one. So if you follow me on LinkedIn, we actually have, we're collaborating with a fund called Ichiba, where we directly invest into video games, not equity, into the project. A lot of them are showing up. So we have, well, I don't think I'm allowed to say how many millions. We have a couple million euros ready to invest. So if you have a project, you can go to Ichiba's LinkedIn page, or you can send it to scouting@agoragamingpartners.com, and we can take a look at your game. But basically, we invest directly into projects. So if we're going to go back to one of the very early slides, if you remember, where I talked about the VC, what they're looking for, and what the publishers are looking for. Remember how I said 3 to 4 for publishers? That's what we're looking for. We don't need the VC exits. We don't need 10x. We don't need 100x. We're looking for a 3x. That's our target. So if we can hit that using the same example, 180,000 units is break even. What we hope to make with that game then is about 700, 800,000 units. That would be our target for us to want to invest into the game. So that's good. So again, VC money doesn't exist much for the reasons I just explained. The math doesn't make sense for indies. That's why you shouldn't waste your time. But there is now project financing funding. I'm sure you're going to see 6 to 10 new funds being announced in the next 6 to 12 months, which is really good for the industry, and I'm very excited. You need a vertical slicer later to come past the initial due diligence. Exceptions do happen, but it's rare. You need to have a fully prepared data room. That's what I showed earlier, the 6 folders. The more data, the better nowadays. You need to be professional. You need to do research on why we should work with you. and why the publisher should work with you. There is less publishers, there's less funding, but the amount of pitches are the same or more. Remember that. So half the amount of money, same or more amount of pitches. So it's really tough for us to find the right gems. And you need to be smart in your go-to-market plans. If you can make the game really good with a lower budget, great. Or if you can put in some of your own cash, you can find angels, loans, whatever, anything to de-risk, it's easier for you. And by the way, I need to make one point clear. Everything I'm telling you guys here is not my so-called opinion. I wish it was easier for you guys. This is just facts, right? I'm not saying it's fair. I'm not saying it's right, but these are the facts. So you have to get with that reality. Next one. So how do you negotiate terms? So I said there is not really that much VC money anymore, and that's true. However, you can do something called a waterfall, which I'm not sure you've heard before. Have you heard of a waterfall? No? So this is something that I've seen more in the last year as well. Basically, valuations have dropped, as I'm sure you know. A lot of investors no longer value IP, because in their heads, it doesn't matter if you came up with this amazing idea, you have a demo, it hasn't launched yet, your IP is worth nothing. So what you can do is do a waterfall. What that means is, when the investor invests into you, you can give them money back before an exit. You don't have to give them all of the money back. Basically, you can structure it in many different ways. So I'm going to give you one example. Let's say that I invest $300,000 in your company, in equity. As you know, or well, as I know, based on experience and on fact, it's going to take 8 years for me to get that money back. If I put $300,000 into the stock market, I'm going to make a lot more money in those 8 years. So what you can do is you can offer me a return on my investment when things do well. It could be that, for example, after your first game launches, if it reaches more than $1 million in profit, you pay me back 100K. Just 100 of my 300, you know? The rest of it, of course, I want you to reinvest into the next game. So I don't want you to stop the growth of your company, but I also don't want to wait 8 years for my money back. And what if your next game fails? You know, you were profitable, you had all this cash, and I got nothing. So you can offer me 100K. You could even offer me all the money back, whatever. And if you give them the waterfall format, you can increase the valuation of your business. Because if I'm not willing to take the risk with you, I shouldn't be paying a cheap valuation, right? So let's say that you're worth $1 million. Instead, you're now worth $2 million because I refuse to take the risk with you, but you're paying me back earlier. That's an example of a waterfall. Everything is a negotiation, right? You can pay me back earlier. In exchange, I pay more for your company. So these are some of the things you can do nowadays. So yeah, waterfalls, I have seen 3 deals in the last 9 months where this happened. It's not that common, but I'm seeing it more and more. Because basically, the investors feel a bit of safety. Publishers, you should expect them to have a higher recoup than before. It used to be very easy to get like a 70-30 before they recouped. Nowadays, it's almost always 100-0, I see in the contracts. Which is horrible. It means you guys are not getting any money when the game launches. So what I usually do is I tell the publisher, you have 2 choices. Either you pay me 6 months extra, or no, we don't have a deal. I refuse 100-0. This has actually worked 100% of the time. Every time I said 6 months, they gave it to us. Because for them, it's important that they recoup 100-0 first. So then, okay, then I need that 6 months, right? It's not my favorite. I prefer, an 80-20 or a 70-30 for the developers, so you actually have cash day one. But if the publisher pushes, ask for that extra money. Ask for as much extra runway you need. And then also, it's been normalized around 50-50 post-recoup, which again, I'm not happy about. These are the facts. I wish it was better. It should be 60-40, it should be 70-30 for you guys, but that's not the case in today's market. Always try to negotiate, of course, the best you can. What you can do, you can be a bit cheeky. So I told you about waterfalls, how to deal with investors. So when I have publishers who refuse to 50-50, what I do instead is I add in bonuses, which is just the same thing. But for some reason, the publisher finance team always likes it. So there was a deal I negotiated last year where they were like, nope, all of our contracts are 50-50. And I was like, well, that's too bad, and we don't have a deal. And then I slept on it, and the next day I was like, what if we add in a bonus tier every 200,000 units? Non-recoupable, straight cash into the developer pocket. And they were like, okay, how much are you expecting? I'll use a fake number. 100,000 USD for every 200,000 units that sells. Straight up cash into our bank, non-recoupable. And they were like, okay, that works. So in my head, I'm like, so technically I just negotiated 10% more rev share. So I don't see the problem with 60-40, but okay, I got the win, whatever, take it. So you can do that. You can try for non-recoupable bonus because it's a win, right? 200,000 units is a lot of copies. So we did 4 tiers, 200, 400, 600, 800. And after that, it disappears. So yeah, you can try that. But again, you can also message me if you guys ever get a publishing deal. We offer advice for free. So if you do get a publishing contract, you need some help, we never charge for a free consultation. We want every single developer out there not to get screwed over, and that's why we do it. Of course, if you want our help to negotiate the deal, then we're going to charge you. But if you just want our opinion, it's free, always. And then something that I'm really excited about, actually, so this is a good thing, I think, is that publishers have started to be more open to region splitting. So as you guys, well, for those of you who know me, I've been in Asia for 11 years now. And if there's one thing I've learned is that, I don't have a better word, Caucasians, white people, don't know how to publish games over here. And vice versa, right? It's really hard for us to properly understand how different Thailand is from Vietnam, from Malaysia, from Philippines. It's not like, Sweden and Germany. We're the same. We're practically the same. If you look on Steam, we buy the same games, we play the same amount, we have similar PCs, but here in Asia, every country is so different. And that's amazing and scary at the same time. So when I negotiate a Western publishing deal, I'm like, do you really know how to publish in Asia? And most of them say yes, and I'm like, no, you don't. So something that has become a lot more usual is finding a partner here in Asia, a local publisher to help in the territories, which is good for 2 reasons. Number 1, you have a higher chance of success selling in Asia. And number 2, you can split the investment. So if you're raising $1 million, let's say, and you want $1 million from the publisher, you could ask $700K from the Western publisher, $300K from the Asian one. So you're effectively de-risking the deal for all parties as well. So that's what we started doing. I have done that over 12 times now, I think, if not more. So yeah, very excited about that. And then, like I said, you can call me, email me, and there are many advisors that will happily help you for free. None of us want to see anyone get screwed over, so you can go on LinkedIn, you can search for advisors, and I guarantee you that 8 out of 10 will do a free consultation for you. And the final point here in big red is negotiate proper termination clauses. Never sign a publisher without consulting a lawyer, okay? And ideally, use a Western lawyer for a Western publisher and an Asian lawyer for an Asian publisher, someone who's familiar with the local law. I've seen a lot of, especially Thai developers, use Thai lawyers, and I'm like, I'm sorry guys, Thai lawyers don't know what they're talking about, because gaming here is really new. You shouldn't be using a local Thai lawyer to negotiate with a UK publisher. You should use a UK lawyer. Yes, they're more expensive, but they know how to fight in courts in the UK. I'm pretty sure the Thai lawyer does not. So make sure you do that. Of course, you can have a Thai lawyer make sure that everything is kosher locally, but use a Western one for a Western publisher and an Asian one for an Asian one. I've seen so many bad publishing agreements when local lawyers have tried to negotiate them because they're not familiar with the territory. I think that was my last slide, right? Yeah, that's it. Hopefully that was helpful. Yeah, any questions? Can I do questions?
Yes.
Any questions? Or am I too scary? Anyone?
Maybe
Yep.
I think I have 2 questions.
Yep.
So first one is that until the last part, at the last part you summarize, I feel like it's more unfriendly. Is it like it sounds unfriendly to indie developer, or is it not?
No, it's the whole industry. So it's not just indie, it's also AAA developers experiencing the same problem. So since I guess this is recorded and they probably can't hear him, I'll just repeat the question. So he asked if it's unfriendly towards indies, and no, the answer is again to everyone. But at the same time, you have to look at it from the other perspective. And again, it's not fair, but a publishing company investing in your firm If the deal fails, nothing happens. If you go to a bank and you don't pay back the loan, you lose your house. So you have to remember that the risk that the publisher is taking is 100% on them. The only thing you lose, of course, you might have to shut down your company, blah, 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 but you don't lose your house. So when people come to me and they're like, okay, why don't I just do a bank loan? Then I was like, take a bank loan if you can. If you believe in your game that much and you're willing to lose your house if it fails, of course a bank is cheaper. They're going to charge you, what, 5 to 10% interest versus a publisher taking half your money. But with a publisher, there's no collateral at all, right? So on the flip side, that's what they're starting to say now. Both investors and publishers are like, we're taking all the risk. Again, I don't agree. This is what they're saying, to be clear, cameras. So that's why we're doing more aggressive terms. That's why when I negotiate, I always try to figure out how do we do a good deal for everyone, right? Something that's fair, region splitting, waterfalls, like how do we make a deal where everybody is happy? That's what AGP tries to do. We try to figure out how we can even the playing field without anybody getting screwed. And of course, in my opinion, so if we ignore the facts, if I could, in a perfect world, I think that after, a 5x, every developer should have 80% of the revenue. That would be the perfect world, because at that point, the publisher has made so much money, you have made so much money, but it's your game, your dream, and your IP. And the publisher can, of course, keep their 20% rev share because they're going to be doing your sales strategy. They're going to keep the game alive on Steam and all the stores and manage it for you. I think that's worth 20%. But I don't think it's worth 50% lifetime. But that is the industry, right? So, I mean, most of AGP's deals, I think I'm proud to say 90%, I think every deal except one has more than 50-50. After a certain number. So we've been able to negotiate better than 50-50. No 80-20 yet though, but you never know. And what was your second question?
The second one would be about funding from others, not publishers. Let's say I'm gonna have a publisher.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw an opportunity for like maybe other funds like government funding or others like fund outside of publisher. Is that a good thing or a bad thing, or when should I find like outside fund?
No, that's amazing. I mean, I don't know what the funding programs are here in Thailand, but for example, the reason why Germany is so successful is because of the government funds. So Germany has, I forgot the number now because it's a stupid amount of money. I think they have like 100 million euros to match investors in Germany. So if I go to Germany now and you set up a studio and I invest 100,000 euros in you, you'll have 100K the day after from the government, free of charge. It's incredible, right? So the German government is really, really tripling down on the gaming industry. I wish more countries did that. It allows, every developer in Germany to go double the amount of time they would somewhere else. So if you have government programs that can match funding, even if there is recoup, even if there's interest rate or whatever, yeah, it's usually a good thing, right? Just read the fine print, because I've also seen bad government deals. I read one in Brazil, I don't know if it was 9 years ago now, where after paying back the grant, the government retained like 25% of the revenue of the game forever. And I swear I thought I had a stroke. I was like, you're telling me that the government who's granting you money to make this game is going to take 25% of your revenue for life? And it was true. I don't know if that program's still there, and I hope Brazil doesn't get mad at me, but it's a long time ago. Don't take those deals, right? That's horrible. But there's a lot of good government programs. Malaysia has amazing ones. They have marketing grants, they have demo grants, etc. So yeah, I hope we see more government fundings. So, I mean, if your question is, should you find money elsewhere? Yes. Just be careful of the terms. But the more money, remember, like this slide right here assumes you're asking for most of the money from the publisher, right? If you come into a publisher and let's say it's $1 million for your game, and you're putting in $500,000, there shouldn't be any chance in the entire world you accept 100-0. Ever. You're putting in half the game. No fucking way. Maybe they'll ask for a 70-30, which is fair because they're also going to add marketing, QA, localization, right? So their $500,000 might be, remember my first slide, 900,000 in investment, which evens out to 70-30 in their favor in terms of money put in on each side. Okay, I'll give you 70-30, right? That's fine, until you recoup 1x. But if you come in asking for 100% of the money, the entire game funded, 100-0 plus 6 months runway isn't the worst deal in the world. Again, I think a developer should always have rev share day one, always. But sometimes that's the only terms that exist. Any other question? Yep.
Could you explain and summarize again about the waterfall, why that is got this name, and as an indie, they have any example case?
So the waterfall, I think that's a finance term. I don't remember if it is a real term or not. I think it is. I think it's a finance term. I've always called it waterfall though, but really it's just a finance term, I think. You can Google it. That just means that there is money being paid back earlier. Like yeah, there is a real write-out of what it means, but yes, I have real cases. AGP, we did a waterfall. So that's a great example. We have already started paying back our investors. Because when we started AGP, we didn't want to sell 30% of our company. We wanted to sell as little as possible. And the only way to do that, right? Because remember, AGP is just people. We don't have an IP. We don't have a product. We have people. Without myself and my team and my co-founder, AGP is nothing. We are just a team of people that work with amazing individuals like yourselves. We work with incredible developers around the world. But if no people, there's no company. So what's that really worth on day one when you started? The real answer is what people pay for it, right? Like whatever they believe in me and the team. But we used the waterfall model because we wanted the investors to have as little as possible. I can't go into the exact terms we offered our investors because I haven't gotten approval from my co-founders to do so. But I can give you an example from another deal. So this was in, I think it was in Sweden. So in Sweden, $500,000, and then you pay back 33%, no, 40%, sorry, of all profits until they get 2x, and then they get 10% of the company. So that's one example. So that would basically value the equity of the firm, right, at 5 million. Because $500,000, I think it was 500K. So $500,000 for 10% equity, but they get a waterfall until 2x, 40% of all the profits. So at the end of the year, right, when they pay out, 40% of that goes back to the investors until they get 2 times their money. So yeah, that's an example. Yeah. Waterfalls, like I said, I've only seen it 3 times in the last, since we started AGP, I've only seen it 3 times. Yeah. It exists a lot outside games, but in games, I've only seen it 3 times. Yeah. Anything else? You seem to have a question? No? All good? Anyone else?
Okay.
No? Then thank you.
That's it. Thank you, Pontus, for sharing us the knowledge. It will be very beneficial for everyone here and people who see it later in the video, YouTube video. So thank you. Please give a round of applause to Pontus.
Thank you, guys.